This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we will be talking about Joe Biden had a speech yesterday. It just kind of seems like a lot of people don't care. Now we care about like guns and everything like that, but the fact that he went out and gave this speech, I'm here. He had like candles and other stuff lit. I was listening to it over the radio, so I didn't get the visuals. But he said a lot of things that he's said before, some things that didn't make sense, a lot of things that were just flat out lies. I didn't even see like RNC Research scrolling through their Twitter page of them posting clips, even like bad parts, to be like, he's lying here and he's a moron, or like, because they'll do stuff. They have like clips about the economy, other kind of stuff like that, but they didn't even care enough to, from what I saw, to even dog on his speech. And I didn't see it trend after it happened when I got on the internet. But so it's interesting, especially since I read this CNN article that I want to talk about how his team is so frustrated. He's got all these youngins who are so frustrated because America isn't seeing the Joe Biden, the empathic grandpa that they need America to see, that they get to see when they're out on the road, when he just cares about people so deeply. America doesn't get to see that because so many people don't tune in to his stuff and etc. And they were so excited when BTS came by the White House. Even though they're literally fans outside of the White House asking, like, I guess Secret Service and other people what they smell like. Because, you know, they're a huge band to talk about anti-Asian hate crime, which if they wanted to be serious about that issue, they could always, I don't know, invite the actual victims to the White House, actually, you know, do something about the people committing the crimes. But it was just a publicity stunt, and it just let people know how much they're drawn to the idea of it being a big publicity stunt. And while they're going through, I'm reading this whole article about how can we get Americans to see, to connect with this Joe Biden. This is America, the Joe Biden we need. I'm just like, what Americans really need and want is for a president to help solve the problems. Like, it finally happened. It finally breached to where I saw that gas was over $5. And it was at the place where I normally went because I knew that they held out for as long as possible, trying to keep it low. But when I had a conversation with the people the other day, they're like, we're not making any money off the gas. They're like, we're lucky if we get like 15 cents off of a gallon and stuff. He's like, it's a very risky business. And so it was $5.09 when I drove by. And I'm like, I know that is hurt. It hurts for him to put that up. I know it hurts the people who has to get it. But people want these problems solved, and CNN had a poll out where like everybody's basically like, Joe Biden's doing a crap job and the economy is number one, and that's the thing where they hate him the most on. So you have the White House and all these young kids, a staff of like 70 different people doing media, connected to his media, upset because he can't get on TikTok because there's all these security possibilities of threats and stuff. And they're like, how can people see Joe Biden? And it's like, bro, just solve the problem. But the problem, which you can see from the speech last night, if you wanted to watch or if you bothered listening to or reading about, is that they're not actually interested in real solutions. They're interested in they're interested in their end game and virtue signaling. But they know the things that they offer won't really help to solve problems. And you're going to see that there's been talk and debates on the Hill, and they're really mad at Republicans who make sense about stuff and try to show realities of the sort of policies that they want to enact. And there was one Democrat that's like, screw the Constitution. That's why this episode says Democrats want to screw the Constitution, because That's what they've uttered, which, by the way, in 2016, they didn't even have constitutional rights in their actual platform. They had constitutional principles. I'm like, that there's a difference between a constitutional right and a constitutional principle. And you might be asking, well, what's the difference? I think we're seeing the difference when the president repeatedly gets up and says, your rights aren't absolute. I'm like, okay, does that mean, are you going to be appealing the 13th Amendment anytime soon, Joe? Who the heck knows? Who the heck knows? But when you get people saying screw the Constitution, and I think we know what's the difference between a principle and a right, and why they carefully worded that in their platform. But we'll be talking about that. Also want to talk about the documentary What is Woman from the Daily Wire. I ran out of time yesterday, so I wanted to make sure I got to today. There's a lot of people talking about it. People are posting clips everywhere, including on TikTok, which is good, especially if it gets in that sort of algorithm with crazy folks who actually made it in the documentary, because there's quite a few people who made it in there. So I'm going to jump on that pretty much first thing, because I don't want to run out of time since we did yesterday. But before I jump into everything, I do want to encourage you guys to go blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website, different articles, different videos. I clipped out a segment of that we did this week with talking about Leah Thomas, because Good Morning America, the swimmer from UPenn who's transgender, they interviewed Leah, and then Daily Wire, in their documentary, they actually had an interview with one of the teammates. And I thought it was really interesting, because Leah's interview was like, oh, I'm happy. Like, they're like, how do you feel about all these women who say you have an advantage? And that's what the data shows, and the critics say this. And Leah's just basically like, well, things are different now because I'm happy. That was like Leah's perspective. And then the teammate is saying, well, we had a problem with it. They're like, this is non-negotiable. Leah helps the team win. And if you guys feel bad about it, we'll bring you guys in therapy to basically learn how to handle it, basically. But we're not making Leah not swim. That's just not going to happen. So it was really, really interesting. So you can go back and watch that. I posted it on YouTube and Facebook. So check out different videos I have. Make sure you're checking out different merch that we have, like the GOAT hoodies and shirts, and have those in different colors. The Denounce White Supremacy Defeat Joe Biden shirt with this list of racism on the back, which you might have to go ahead and get, because he's saying these rights aren't absolute. So like I said, 13th, 14th, they might be going places. So go ahead and pick up that shirt. I do have another one that I just posted the other day, and it's not like in the ad form, so I'm sorry if it's a little, obviously not to the standards of the other ones as far as the picture goes, but it says this is my pride flag, so we got that one out there, so you guys can go check out the different stuff on the website. I want to thank Brighter Michigan Pack. I'm in their studio. If I say something today that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that, but I do appreciate that they always want to uplift conservative voices, and I enjoy being here in the studio. Okay, and also, if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Anything that you guys can do to support, I really, really appreciate. And also making sure that you're liking, that you're sharing, that you're hitting notification bells, and all the things. Do all the things. Okay, so first thing, you guys know I like to laugh a little bit. Today is National Donut Day. And so while I was scrolling through the RNC's page, the research page on Twitter, they had this little gem from the past, this little blast from the past with Joe Biden, and it's hilarious that they brought this up. And it's a good tweet. It's a really good tweet for Donut Day.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
By the way, that saying is totally on the shirt. It did make the list. So what's funny is when I would bring that up sometimes to people and about the 7-Eleven thing, and like, he's just joking. I'm like, he literally says, though, he's not joking. What's that song? Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. Joe Biden definitely hits that sometimes quite often. So I thought that was a good tweet for the RNC. GOP's out there doing their thing. That was a good one, a really good one. Really appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about the "I Am a What Is a Woman" documentary from the Daily Wire that Matt Walsh put out. So Matt Walsh would just have this thing where he's asking people, "What is a woman?" You want to say, which apparently Supreme Court justices aren't able to answer that question anymore on their hearings. We know that from Ketanji Brown, but he would just ask people, "What is a woman?" You're saying that these trans people are like, "What is a woman?" And people would keep saying, it's whoever feels like they're a woman, whoever defines himself as a woman. He went on Dr. Phil's show, which he did include a segment in the documentary. And apparently they took that off of Hulu and everything because the people who participated said they were so triggered, offended by it, that I guess they just ended up taking it down, which I don't understand because everyone was talking about it and clips are basically everywhere. So they might as well get their views. So that's crazy to me that they took that down, but it just lets you know, I guess, the power in the lobby of all this sort of nonsense. But nobody could really answer his question. And he was like one person who opposed basically all that. I think maybe there were two other people who weren't quite on the train, but they still were like, have this like the sort of apology, like, I understand where you're coming from, blah, blah, blah. But, Matt's just like, what's a woman? Like, I care about truth and just very, clear cut to the point, and nobody can answer his really just dry, simple questions. And they're like, well, it's a woman who's whoever identifies as a woman. They're like, what is that? And like, it's whoever identifies as a woman. He's like, but what is that? It's just a circular definition. You're using the word to define the word. So it stumped a lot of people. It stumped a lot of people who just frankly did not want to answer the question at all. He went to a tribe in Africa who was like laughing at the prospect of a lot of this stuff. And it just makes him like, man, this is like such first world sort of nonsense. He went to the Women's March. He went to New York. He went to California. He talked to different experts in the field, pediatricians, people who actually do surgeries, and professors in those sort of studies, and didn't really give him good answers, man. Couldn't really. And it's not that they can't give good answers. It's just that the ideology is so strong that it forces you to not be able to answer really simple questions. So I want to play two clips. I believe I still have them from yesterday. From this documentary. There's a lot of good stuff in it. There's a lot of good stuff in it. But these two are really telling right here. But I do highly recommend it.
I'm not even talking about social context. I'm just trying to start by getting to the truth,
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of like getting to the truth. Again, in social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
If I probe about what the truth is?
You keep invoking the word truth, which is condescending and rude. I'm saying to you...
How is the word truth condescending and rude?
Why don't you tell me what your truth is, and you're walking on 30 seconds more of thin ice before I get up.
So how is it possible he can go to like a professor who's supposed to be versed in these issues and can't communicate at all? And when he asks for simple definitions, and says truth, that he was so triggered and ready to says it's transphobic and wants to go and to leave. I'm amazed that any of these people talk to him at all, to be frank. But if they were going to have that sort of attitude, but what kind of questions did they? And they had to send in the documentary. Some people mentioned some of the questions that he asked like prior, like, so they must have sent some of the stuff that they wanted to talk about. So it's not like everybody must have been going in blind. I don't know if everyone like knew what was going to be kind of the end game, but I don't know how you can not know who the Daily Wire is by now. I don't know. but he got triggered. He did stay and they did continue that conversation a little bit, but that idea that what is truth and he responds, what is with your truth? And he's like, and Matt says, I came here to talk to you to get, to the bottom of this. And I mean, Matt's basically just looking for someone to say an adult human female, and that's what he just says, has his wife say at the end of the movie. But no one really wants to say that, because they want it to be whatever I identify with. But if anyone can identify with being something that makes you that thing, then what is that word meaningful? Is it meaningful to even be a woman? Like, people will say that to me, and I'm like, you can't explain that better than, like, how's that any different? I mean, my nephew can make a better case for why he's Spider-Man than what they can make for what is a woman, by the kind of logic that they have. So you did get see a lot of those attitudes when Matt would push, and Matt wasn't even like pushing very hard. And Matt can be very aggressive. I like Matt Walsh when he's on your side, but if you disagree, Matt Walsh is a really annoying guy, man. Oh my gosh. He can be, if you're like on a different sort of issue, because he's like a dog that won't let go of the bone. I don't think Matt is always right. He's right a lot. And most of the time I agree. But that wasn't even like aggressive. I think his poker face was okay. Some people are like, "Oh, it's excellent. He needs a reward." I'm like, "Nah, sometimes his face doesn't have chill to me." But let me show you this other video.
Gametes. That's what makes me male.
No, your sperm don't make you male.
Then what does?
It's a constellation.
In reality, in truth, okay?
Whose truth are we talking about?
The same truth that says we're sitting in this room right now, you and I.
No, you're not listening.
If I see a chicken laying eggs and I say that's a female chicken laying eggs, did I assign female, or am I just observing a physical reality that's happening in the world?
Does a chicken have gender identity? Does a chicken cry?
Well,
Does a chicken commit suicide? Let's
does that have to do
frame
with-
it, because you're trying to...
Chicken has sex like any biological
chicken has
organism.
an assigned gender, but a chicken doesn't have a gender identity.
So we assign female to chickens when they lay eggs?
We assume they're female if they lay eggs.
Yeah, so everyone was like, "Oh, it's so funny, it's so funny." It's chilling as well, and informational. Um and I was like, I was thinking back, I'm like, I don't know if it was as funny as most people like promised it would be. And I'm like, I don't remember laughing out loud, and then all of a sudden it was like chickens. I was like, oh no, I definitely had laughed out loud. Does a chicken cry? Does a chicken commit suicide? Um There's other parts of this interview. She gets really upset when Matt ends up bringing up chemical castration, the sort of drugs that she prescribed to children, the similar drugs that would be used to chemically castrate like sex offenders in prison. And so she really got offended by that term. He like literally looked it up. He's like, no, this is like an accurate term. And she's like, I help children and etc. So they build up all these sort of illogical walls to just blurry the lines of morality for themselves. I mean, we know that it's not moral to give all these kids these things. And she's just like, hormone blockers, they're total puberty blockers. Hormones, well, she says puberty blockers is just like pressing pause when you're playing music. That's what she said, like as if it's totally reversible and it's not going to cause any sort of long-term damage. And it's just absolutely not true. But this person, Colin Wright, pointed out, he tweeted, if you want to get a sense of the quality of the experts being cited in the Scientific American article, Michelle Forster, the blue-haired canned chickens cry lady from Matt Walsh blogs What is a Woman documentary, is quoted extensively throughout it. So, and there's an article, they posted one, what the science on gender affirming care for trans kids really says. And this Can a Chicken Cry lady who says puberty blockers is like pressing pause on music is quoted throughout it. So, oh man, there's a lot of agendas there. And Matt also had someone on the documentary who, at 40, they were lesbian. And some of the pictures they showed, I'm like, this is a nice looking woman. And then she just like, did all this stuff. And now, I looks like I guess a pretty convincing passing sort of man, but she has to take all these different medicines and hormones, um and it really was like a botched sort of surgery. And they're like, the more people they can convince and get into this is just more cash for big pharma. So and my mom was watching this. I watched this with three of my sisters and my mom, and I did know a lot of stuff that was in the documentary, and not because it wasn't good information or like fresh or they didn't do the research. It's just that I do a lot of research, and I'm sure we look in a lot of similar circles. So I can't think of anything that was like, oh, I really didn't know that. But it was a great documentary. Like, even like, well, the Star Wars guys, like there's a Star Wars shop owner. I'm like, I saw that guy. I think I even played his clip on the show. There are TikTok clips that I've played on this show. But and then he mentioned John Money and Kinsey, and I've mentioned them on the show a little bit too. But if you don't know about Kinsey, man, I mentioned him at the end of one episode. I'm like, I just want to ruin your day really quickly. He really wanted to change people's opinions and views on sex in America, and he believed that children are, because before it was just kind of like children become sexual, and he believed that children are like always sexual. And in his book, he had this infamous table of information of children and time it takes for them to get like aroused, which he got from a pedophile who worked for, I believe, U.S. government, doing like land observation or something like that. So I guess as he traveled, he would just go around committing sexual acts against children and documented it. And Kinsey, wouldn't give up this person. And they had other sort of pedophiles that would write to Kinsey and send in different things. And there was one woman, she was pretty convinced that her father, that some information about her was in one of Kinsey's books, and her father sent in her rape torture chart to Kinsey. And the institute still exists, and they're like, we would rather destroy all of our documents than have it turned over to the police or Congress or anyone, because we promised these people that it would be confidential. So and there was even a movie about Kinsey that Liam Neeson was in, and they did not mention a lot of like this really, really gross stuff. So I don't know what to say other than it's disgusting. And I'm really, really glad that the Daily Wire was able to put something like that on blast. I'm glad that a lot of people are talking about it. I hope more people look into it, because this idea that children need to be introduced to all the sexual stuff as early as possible, really, Kinsey was a part of that, and he was a pervert who allowed perverts to thrive. And so a lot of people are having these conversations and trying to pervert your children as early as possible. You have to know that it comes from an, I sincerely mean, demonic place. Okay. And they also talked about John Money, where he had some pretty egregious experiments that he did on children that helped launch a lot of like the gender sort of theory stuff that we see in America today. So they tapped into it a little bit, but they didn't go into it a ton. And it was so good it could have been longer, but it was an appropriate length. The documentary, it was well produced, it was well edited, the quality was really good. It was a really, really good piece of content. Really, really good piece of content. I didn't have a Daily Wire subscription before. I asked my dad, because we were having Bible study like over at his house, and I was like, hey, Dad, you want to get me a Daily Wire subscription? Because he's really into politics and stuff. So I figured maybe he would, like, I don't know, do it or whatever. And so he's like, oh, well, how would I do that? And my brother's like, you got to pay for it. And he's like, oh, then I guess not. And then everybody started laughing at me. And I'm like, well, my birthday's in a couple of days. But I ended up just, getting it myself. So there's that. And it was And I just did the monthly thing for now, but yeah, it was well worth it. Well worth it. They did a really good job, so I do recommend it. Kudos to them, props to them. I saw a little back and forth with people who were just like, you guys need to really just put it out as something that you can purchase as opposed to subscription stuff. And there's people who claim to be like people who really like their work and want to follow it, or people who aren't conservative and but they're just anti woke, who don't want to subscribe to the Daily Wire, and they're just like, bro, just make it a DVD. And then Matt kind of snapped back and like, you guys pay for subscriptions for crap for people who, which I'm sure people who pay for subscriptions on stuff don't feel like the content is crap. So there's that. But people who hate you, now that's true. People do pay for subscriptions for stuff with content creators who hate them all the time. Disney very much hates people who don't think like them, for sure. They don't even like their fans. You can see it with Star Wars, what they just did recently. We already talked about that this week. But so I do understand the buy-in, and I do appreciate people who support me, people who support them, and they do need support. But I don't know if they would necessarily be losing anything if they just offered What Is a Woman on DVD, or just had like people had to pay like $20 or something like that, or $25, or even if it was like a higher than that, if people were willing to do like a one-time purchase. Now, for me, if just saying, if for folks out there, if you just want to see it the one time and you pay the subscription and you could still get the other content that you want for a month, like that makes it sound like you're getting actually a better part of the deal. If you want to just, because you can pay for like a month at a time. So to me, it makes sense for them to make DVDs of certain things that people may want to see. Even though they may not want to subscribe, because after they see what they want to see, they may just drop off, and you may see the drop off in subscription. So you might as well, I think, get a bigger buy at the time when that stuff premieres. So I don't know, they got to do what's right for them, but to me it makes more sense if they would just allow that to be something that you could mass produce on that level. But I think the conversation started because critics hadn't really watched it, and they're like, well, they probably didn't want to buy a subscription to watch it. I don't think they care about what critics have to say anyway. I mean, people who watch it really, really like it, and they sent it out. They had early viewings of people in their, circles who watch it, who have other big audiences, who talked about it, raved about it. And you have big TikTokers, like a friend of mine, this is Salvi. She's almost got like 1 million viewers, and she's a person on the right, but she's not as aggressive as me and some other people with our commentary sometimes. So I'm sure she probably has more crossover than I do. She talked about it. So and is going to continue talking about it. So a lot of people are talking about it. So I don't think they care what the critics have to say one way or another. Anyway, let's move on. I think I said enough about it for now. Good job to the Daily Wire. Go watch it for yourself, because there are some shocking things in there. Joe Biden, of course, said his speech yesterday, and he talked about gun control. It wasn't much that he hasn't said before, but he did make comments about basically that the Senate needs to act, not just Congress, not just the reps, but you actually need the Senate to act, and you need 10 Republicans to do something, and of course Republicans have blocked stuff in the past, blah, 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 blame. And if they don't act, then we're going to take it to the ballot box. So they really want this to be a big election issue. And I don't think it's going to get where he wants it to go. Because first of all, the economy is number one to people, and people do care about gun violence, and they care about their kids. They definitely care about crime, but the food on the shelves is low, gas is high, crime is up. I don't think now is going to be a good time to convince people to get rid of their guns. And so there's a couple different measures, because they're just like, do something. And they want to reintroduce like assault weapons ban that didn't do anything in the past. They want to, Columbine happened during the assault weapons ban, if I'm not mistaken. They want to raise the age. He suggested raising the age of when you could buy like a firearm to like 21. And I'm like, if you're a 20-year-old woman who's on your own, because this happens, because 18, you're pretty much an adult, correct? People can go away to college, people can buy their own apartment, etc. I have a cousin who's getting married. I don't think is he 21? I guess he is. Because he did finish college. But they're young people do stuff all the time, including getting married. You're gonna say if a woman is, maybe she has a child, she's living on her own, and she's 20 years old, she can't have a firearm to protect her from things that go bump in the night. She just has to rely on the police, who we know don't always show up, depending, or show up promptly. The Uvalde, you had all these police standing around and not acting. A border patrol agent off duty was at a barber shop, stopped in the middle of his haircut, borrowed a shotgun from the barber, and then went and had handled the business. Not all the cops standing around, which I heard they are not cooperating very well at this point. So that's what the Biden administration should be focusing on, getting to the bottom of what actually happened there and making sure it doesn't happen again. But they want to focus on, they say they don't want to take your guns. They obviously do. You're like, we don't want to punish law-abiding citizens. You obviously do, because you're not tackling people who break the law, like Hunter Biden, who lied on his ATF form to purchase a firearm. And then his girl like ditched the gun into some kind of like trash at a school or something crazy like that. So I don't want to hear anything from President Biden until they at least address that. I think Republicans should do something, like make a bill that's just basically a publicity stunt, but bear with me. Like, we want to introduce the Hunter Biden legislation to punish people who lie on their ATF form, and like, in which people are supposed, that's already legal anyway, but they got to raise something that will like basically have people talk about this and force the president to talk about it to some regard, because I'm sure someone will ask him about it, or at least the incompetent new press secretary. I don't want to hear this man talk about guns until he like takes some responsibility. But they're not an administration of responsibility. This is the man who said, like, if you hear something outside, just shoot your gun in the air outside. This is a man who said, if we just pull out of Afghanistan, all those guns and weapons are going to be left behind, and they're going to be using them against your kids. And what did he do? He did that himself. This is a man who had them drone strike a man in Afghanistan, and they're like, oh, he had bombs. And like, no, he didn't have bombs or canisters of water that he was bringing home for his family, and they bombed him, some other adults, and some kids. And this is an administration who held no one responsible for that. No one responsible at all. And they're like, the strike was true. At first they were lying about it. And the New York Times did an investigation like, bro, they was lying. And they're like, oh, well. And Rand Paul was like, shouldn't you guys have made sure this person was a terrorist before you attacked? Isn't this kind of like making more terrorists? This is an aid worker who wanted to come to the United States and was bombed for water canisters. And no accountability. So this is the administration. It sounds like we need a background check on Biden and his administration. That's what we need. And we want them to be the only ones with guns? I think not. Someone who said, this isn't about your freedom, like that quote came out of his mouth as the president of the United States. Granted, it was during the pandemic, but for that to be able to exit your mouth as the president of the free world, leader of the free world, they say. No, he cannot be the only one with guns. His Secret Service can't be the only one with guns. The military can't be the only ones. No. And he said, well, people say, how if someone is 18, they can go to the army and fight for the country. He's like, but they're trained. They're heavily trained, etc. Blah blah blah. So okay, so why is it to raise the age of firearms? Which, by the way, I guess we could talk about it if that's no longer the age of where you're like a legal adult and you can't sign contracts anymore by yourself. You can't sign those student loans anymore or whatever. You can't, I guess, buy your own property unless your mommy and your daddy signs on. You can't get married unless your mom and your daddy signs on. You definitely can't vote. Definitely shouldn't be able to vote if you can't purchase a firearm at 18. And you know what? That might save the country. Who knows? Because there's a lot of dumb kids out here voting. And it's very easy for the White House to manipulate these people, apparently. That's probably why they want them on TikTok so bad. So these things don't make sense. But if you're saying it's trained, then why not have, like, I don't know, make it so there's if they really feel that's the problem, that's the difference, not maturity, but training, then the government could always make it like a mandatory, or maybe not no, they should, if they think it's about training, people need to be trained. If they have firearms and it's a Second Amendment right, then why not make it so there's a mandatory class where you have to train with firearms in schools? If we want a well-regulated militia, which, by the way, well-regulated doesn't mean you regulate it out of existence. You got to go by the old-fashioned language, which they meant like just kind of ready to go. So if their problem is training and not so much maturity, and they're mature enough to go kill for America if they're 18, and the reason why is because they're trained, and there's these professionals all around them or whatever, of other killers, then make it so that people get that sort of training in school. You make school mandatory. So where else are you going to make sure that they learn that stuff? Or are you going to make becoming a, if someone gets a firearm, that they're going to have training, which they'll have to pay for, which you're making another hurdle for poor people to be able to defend themselves. Biden is just the worst. He also talked about how we need to make sure that there's background checks. He's like, including at gun shows and online sales. You cannot purchase a firearm online from like a licensed dealer or anything and not have some kind of background check. You have to go to a store and pick up the firearm. That is how it works. And I'm sure he's been told this. He's just lying to you. He can't not know this. He can't not know that if you go to a gun show, that they will do a background check. Steven Crowder did a video about this a couple years ago, where he just went to a gun show and tried to get firearms with, like, was asking, do you have to have a background check? And people are like, I'm not going to jail for you. So how can they really want to solve issues and solve problems if they're not being honest in the least bit? If they're not being honest in the least bit. And that includes with not just Biden, but other with legislators. So I'm going to play this clip. I don't think I played it yet. Language.
So spare me the bullshit about constitutional rights.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not yield. And I'm not going to yield for my entire 5 minutes, so don't ask again.
So that's the attitude right now of the sort of arguments they're having. So that was David Cicilline. Let's watch a little bit more of his confrontation when they were talking about guns.
In response to the gentleman from Texas's comment about why don't we just wait till we understand all the facts of Uvalde with some more investigation underway, he acted as if we've had 2 shootings in America, 2 mass shootings, and we're coming to respond to that. We are responding to thousands and thousands and thousands of shootings in this country over the last decade. And so what have been developed here are developed in response to a gun violence epidemic. And the idea,
will the gentleman yield for 10
no, I will
seconds?
not yield. The idea that we should wait while we can have families that have lost loved ones who are expecting Congress to respond.
Time belongs
and the
to the gentleman
idea, as
from Rhode
Mr.
Island.
Roy suggested,
Wait
that we
before
should just
commenting on
wait
something
to
you don't
find
know the
out.
facts about.
We should be we've waited too long already.
I'm
We
not talking about
failed
waiting
to
about the
respond to the
legislation. Time
cries
belongs
of
to the
people
gentleman
all
from
across
Rhode
this
Island.
country who have asked and demanded that Congress act. So no, we shouldn't wait. We shouldn't wait another second. We shouldn't wait another minute,
you don't
another
know what
day.
happened
We
in
should
Uvalde.
act now. The second thing
You don't
is
know
my
the
friend
facts.
and colleague from Colorado just made reference to this suite of bills as shallow and inconsequential. Shallow and inconsequential. I'm going to go through just a few pieces of this. Ghost guns were used in a shooting in Santa Clara, California.
I know they're planning to do about stuff that people can print. Anyway, I agree that they need to pause about trying to politicize Uvalde with not knowing the facts. I try to be careful about what information I put out as this stuff comes out, but more man, this, I think it was Monday, I found out it was the New York Post released a video about this kid had a bag of dead cats. And it was last week, and like through the weekend, you always hear Republicans talking about mental health, mental health, mental health. Excuse me. And then Democrats, and I did a video about this on TikTok, and I had shared it around, but they're always like really upset about Republicans talking about mental health because they feel like it's a cop-out because they don't want to talk about guns. And Republicans talk about guns, but again, a lot of these stuff that people mention for common sense gun control, they mention things that are already, that people already do, like Biden mentioning background checks, like gun shows, online stuff. We have background checks. I feel like people don't know that we have background checks. I feel like people legitimately don't know that happens. But this kid, he had did self-mutilation with himself, and there were things that first came out like he was cutting himself with knives, and he was violent, and other broken home, etc. But other stuff came out like the bag of dead cats. So it's like, okay, this person went from disturbed to deranged. And this is probably someone who needs to be like involuntarily committed, because that sounds like the making of a serial killer, and obviously it was. He was violent, threatened to sexually assault women who were like rejected him. He did this online, and he also did this in person. Apparently he was violent with one of his ex-girlfriends. So there's things that should have been able to pop up in some kind of background check if things got reported. So what in Buffalo, the Buffalo shooter, they actually legitimately said out loud at school, like they wanted to do a school shooting, and they still were able to get guns legally, like, and pass it back. So I don't want these people to have guns, but why aren't you flagging stuff on their records? If there's nothing that's going to be on their records, of course they're going to pass a background check. Of course they're going to pass a background check. So where is the disconnect here of that stuff not making it so that stuff will get flagged so they don't get some kind of firearm? Because you can't just have Americans not be able to get things with, and especially without some kind of due process too, but you're trying to just target law-abiding citizens as if we are all somehow to blame, we are all somehow dangerous just because we might have a firearm. And it doesn't make sense when you can actually target this kind of stuff. And a big thing with Uvalde is obviously how the police acted. And that's one reason why you have the amount of casualties that you have. Even one would have been tragic, but this is really puzzling. Why the police acted in the way that they did. Again, an off-duty Border Patrol agent was having his hair cut, stopped, got a shotgun, and went in and didn't care about their orders or whatever. They said, went in and did the job himself. So I haven't heard Biden say much about wanting to get to the bottom of why the police acted in the way that they did. And the White House was asked about hardening schools, which that's a solution. Like, Republicans have no solutions. Like, no, Republicans are mentioning solutions. And there's over 400,000 guns in the, well, there's more than that. Like, there's so many guns in the country and so many people who have them. Like, you're not just gonna be able to get rid of them. You're not gonna be able to get rid of how many guns that we have in the country. I think I meant to say million, but so wouldn't it make sense to try to make these places, which the Buffalo shooter said that these gun-free zones are an easy target? Why not try to make sure that the schools are protected? But that's not something that Biden believes in.
And when it comes to schools, and I don't know what he said specifically about schools. I know there's been conversation about hardening schools. That is not something that he believes in. He believes that we should be able to give teachers the resources to be able to do the job that they're meant to do at schools.
Yeah. I can understand these people who are like, we just want kids to be able to live their lives and have their childhood, which a lot of people grew up with so many guns back in the day. There are people in the 80s who people who had like gun racks and stuff on their trucks at school and stuff. So there's older people that I know who have talking about this issue, and they're like, yeah, we think it's mental health because we had way more access to guns and stuff in the past. So and another thing that makes people go off and do a lot of this stuff as well is the instant fame that the shooters get. So like Daily Wire, for example, they won't say the shooter's name, they won't show his face, but you have all these other places that will still do that. So they want to live in some kind of infamy. So there's that, and we still contribute. People were obsessed about the Buffalo shooters manifesto, so much so that they were like, the Democrats were and the media were blaming his manifesto basically on Republicans. Were tying it to Republicans. They were tying it to Tucker Carlson, even though in the manifesto he said he didn't like conservatives, he didn't like Fox News, but he was a racist who was afraid of like the Great Replacement theory, which white people actually being replaced. But Tucker Carlson talks about basically like demographics is destiny, where you'll have like people immigrate in and it'll slowly begin to like change the political landscape if they're not like basically integrating within the culture, which Democrats have talked about that all the time, have gleefully talked about all the time. I played like a montage actually when that stuff was going down, and there people on Morning Joe Biden, a bunch of people said stuff like people coming in to like moving into Texas, for example, and they're excited for the day that turns blue. But they wanted to conflate that with what the shooter did, because they wanted to say, oh, these GOP, they're pushing the white supremacy, and that's what's happened today. When there's a Jimmy Fallon clip of Jimmy Fallon talking about the U.S. census and how white people are actually like declining, and the crowd like erupted in applause. And I'm like, racism is bad, guys. And people feel so comfortable. Like, people are mad about white supremacy, but they don't mind being the opposite side of that coin. And I'm just like, can we just stop being racist? But no, we can't, because too many people find it advantageous. It's such a good political tactic for so many different people. So no, they can't just do things like that work, like put more people in schools to protect kids. They can't just do that, because that makes too much sense. And the end game is really disarming you. It just is. It just is. I mean, when Hillary Clinton was running, someone was asked about like the possibility of doing a buyback like in Australia. And she's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I'm like, bro, that was a mandatory buyback. You're not about to do a mandatory buyback in the United States. And the criminals aren't giving up their guns. You're just asking people to be less safe. So only the criminals and the government who protects them sometimes will have guns. Why would we do that? Especially right now, again, at a time when the economy is bad, there's foods is the shelves are getting bare, gas is high, crime is rampant, and they may arrest these people, but they're letting them go, man. Clean them down, letting them off on bail. They don't even like cash bail. You have groups who pay their bail. People out doing all kinds of wild stuff. And you want citizens who've committed no crimes to give up their guns, or to have to pay for different fees and licenses or whatever for their guns. That's crazy. There's one congressperson who decided to actually go through the guns and show folks what they actually will be giving up, and they didn't like it.
Right here in front of me, I have a Sig Sauer P226. Comes with a 21-round magazine. This gun would be banned. Here's a 12-round magazine. This magazine would be banned under this current bill. It doesn't fit. because this gun was made for a 20-round, 21-round magazine. This gun would be banned under this bill. Here's a Sig Sauer 320. It takes a 20-round magazine. Takes a 20-round magazine. Here's a 12-round magazine that would be banned. It doesn't fit because it would be banned. This gun would be banned under this bill. Here's a gun I carry every single day to protect myself, my family, my wife, my home. This is a XL Sig Sauer P365. Comes with a 15-round magazine. Here's a 7-round magazine, which would be less than what would be lawful under this bill if this bill were to become law. It doesn't fit. So this gun would be banned.
I hope the gun is not loaded.
I'm at my house. I can do whatever I want with my guns.
Here's a point of order.
Is exactly what the Democrats want to do. Now let's just take
point of order. Man doing things in home. Man, Steven Crowder, I mentioned him earlier. He was one time he was doing a show and he was talking to some young women about guns, and then he was actually like, let's just go to a range, and they got to learn a little bit about them, and then they actually felt better. And one was like, okay, I think I'll actually keep doing this, coming back to the range and stuff. But just so many people who are just like totally uneducated about it. And there's tons of people who are way more educated about it than me. So I'm just like, how can a president of the United States get up and just lie so blatantly about this stuff? But the fact that they don't want to harden schools, the fact that they're not interested in having some kind of veterans or teachers carry, or having more resource officers and stuff involved, doesn't make any sense. That they think that, I don't know, they're going to block new purchases, they're going to hinder the Second Amendment rights of young adult Americans because they're not 21 yet. Doesn't make sense. But they'll do what they can until they can do some more sort of like chipping away until they can force some kind of confiscation if they could. But I think financially they'll try to make it difficult for people, like maybe having different licenses and requiring like expensive sort of classes and other stuff like that until they can weaken the population enough to get what they want. But it seems like dealing with mental health and protecting the schools, hardening the schools, as they say, is a much more feasible option as of right now, since there are like 393 million privately owned firearms in the US. And that's like 120 guns for every 100 Americans. That's from a CNN article. So, yeah, how are you going to run up that many guns? And there's so many people like online from other countries like, I just don't understand the US. We did this here in Australia. We haven't had any problems. That's not true. People, they've had other mass shootings as well. People in the UK, like in England and London or whatever, they're like, we don't have this kind of stuff. I'm like, I remember when you guys were having acid attacks. That sucked. I sure don't want somebody pouring acid in my face. They have a huge stabbing problem. They're like, we're going to have to ban knives now. Y'all banning knives? So violent crime is an issue. Violent crime is an issue. And I understand they think guns are scary, but we wouldn't be United States of America if we did not have our guns. And as much as we like our guns for protection, and as much as we like our guns for hunting, the reason why we have our Second Amendment is a deterrent of the government. And our founding fathers, dealing with tyrannical government themselves, knew that we had to have a God-given right to bear arms, which they affirmed in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't give us the right to bear arms. It just affirms that we have the right to bear arms. And it says that it should not be infringed, shall not be infringed. Because they understood the dangers of a tyrannical government, and there needed to be some kind of deterrent. Even Biden will keep getting up in line saying, you couldn't have a cannon. Literally not true. Literally not true. Literally not true. When they're like pirates attacking, they're like, can we use our cannons? Like, that's why we have the Second Amendment. Yeah, you can use your cannons to protect yourself. So literally not true. Am I saying everyone should go out and buy a cannon or whatever? I think that would be expensive. I don't think that's practical. Why would you use it? That'd be, man, it would be practical. So we'll just kind of leave it at that when you go into like all those different scenarios. But there are people who own tanks. There was one people were talking online about like you can't go buy a tank, and people were like, yeah, you can, and someone was like, I have a friend who has like a tank museum and all kinds of other stuff. But yeah, they don't want to. To me, they don't really want to solve these problems. They're getting mad because someone's demonstrating what you're actually outlawing. And Eric Solwall got really mad at that tweet, and I guess he was there, but he got really mad and he had retweeted something out. I'm trying to find the tweet. Eric Swalwell, he said, "This is who the Republicans are. Kids are being buried and they're bragging about how many guns they own during our gun safety hearing. They are not serious. They are a danger to our kids." And Congressman Greg Stubbe said, and I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his last name, but he said, "If you hate the Second Amendment, move to China. I hear you know some people there." Because Solwell, of course, had like the Chinese spy affair with like Fang Fang or whatever. So it was a good dunk. Very good dunk. Last thing I want to talk about before I go, there's a CNN article that I mentioned about Joe Biden. The CNN put out, beneath Biden's struggle to break through is a deeper dysfunction among White House aides. And it is a really fascinating article, and I'll go ahead and post it online because I don't have the time to go through the whole thing. But it talks about the different aides. There's like 70 people like on staff, I guess, doing stuff as far as their media. And there's young aides who really want to do a lot of digital stuff, that, you know, they're really frustrated when they do like sort of more traditional stuff and no one is watching, no one is viewing, but Biden and his like inner circle are sort of more old school because they've been doing that sort of work longer than a lot of these younger ones have been alive. And that's serious. And there's just really a big disconnect and between them. And the piece, reading the whole piece, just lets you know how delusional a lot of these folks are working in the administration. And they're just like, we just need to, they're like, Biden is he can be so personable and so good with people one-on-one and show them their empathy. Yet we put him like on a green screen, like he's on a set of Jeopardy or something like that. And people just don't really feel that and can't connect. And I'm not saying he doesn't connect to some people who can talk to people in person, but he doesn't come off well on TV. Like, the night before, you know, that empathy that they want him to have wasn't quite there. A lot of people started kind of seeing through his act a bit after Afghanistan, when he was just really angry and aggressive. And Meghan McCain, she was like, this isn't the Joe Biden that I know, who was very kind to her after her father passed away. And she's like, I don't recognize this man. And so this idea that people had of old Grandpa Joe started to wither away, and it's frankly not good enough for people. But they are so convinced that this empathy, showing that Joe Biden, they're like the ice cream cool sort of shades guy that they had in the campaign. They're like, people, oh, that's not really working right now, but right now we need the Grandpa Joe, the empathy Joe. And I'm like, first of all, that licking ice cream car Joe Biden, I don't think that was very effective. A lot of people didn't vote for Joe Biden because they liked him. Like, they wanted things to be boring. They wanted things to go kind of back to like people not having to care about politics. And and mostly people despise Trump. That's what it was. That's what it was. So Joe Biden wasn't elected because people really connected with him because his social media team was good at their jobs. That's not what happened in the least bit. That's why you shouldn't reward losers, because they can't see when their stuff stinks. So they're still convinced that, I don't know, some of the images that they had of Joe Biden were convincing, and maybe they think he's still like a good sort of candidate that they even put up. It was people just really dislike Trump, and the entire levers of power were against Trump, and the people picked one guy over another. Like, I don't know anyone who really gets on like TikTok or something and defends Joe Biden. They might at the most they'll say Biden is bad, but he's still worse. He's still better than Trump. That's the best. That's what they'll say. It's not true, but that's what they'll say. No one really goes to bat for Joe. No one really goes to bat. The most passionate people get is they'll say, well, presidents can't control gas prices. And I feel sorry for people who are dumb enough to believe that Biden has nothing to do with gas prices after he actually said on the campaign trail that he wanted to destroy the fossil fuel industry, that his son helped China get like coal mines and stuff, which like they use for batteries for electric cars, that he has Granholm who be the energy secretary who was invested in green cars and stuff, and Joe Biden actually like spoke at like a place where she was like invested in, and then you have her and Pete Buttigieg and all these folks coming out just saying like, hey, people need to buy electric cars. Like they're letting the agenda be known so hard. I'm not saying that Joe Biden goes to the gas station every day and like has some kind of secret meeting in a back room and says, hey, today the prices need to be $5.09. That's not what people are saying when the president controls gas prices. We're just saying he has something to do with it. He has something to do with it because his aggression toward that industry really, really hurts production. So I'm sorry to go off on that rant. It's just really annoying. I saw a friend post something today and I'm just like, you guys are so ridiculous. So ridiculous. So anyway, these people believe that Joe Biden has this big image problem and they don't know quite how to convey it. They're frustrated that a lot of people aren't seeing it. And they were excited to have BTS come to the White House and all these other different celebrities, and people viewed in, like millions of people viewed in when BTS was like at the White House, but that's because BTS was at the White House. They had nothing to do with Joe Biden. It was BTS. And they talked about Asian hate and all those stuff. Now, if it wasn't performative, and obviously it is performative, and the article also gives it away, I believe that it's performative, but if it wasn't performative and he actually cared about Asian discrimination, he could have had some of the like a lot of victims there. Instead of like BTS, they could like arrest these folks and keep them in jail. It was a useful thing to talk about when it was a crazy like white person who like committed like a mass shooting. When it happens very often in like New York and it's a bunch of black people doing it, who's just attacking these folks on subways and stuff, they don't want to talk about that so much. It's not very convenient because they don't think those people are Trump voters. So it's very, very performative, their administration, and they care so much about public opinion, and everybody does in politics, but this article just makes it seem so childish. And they even like lament the fact that they can't get Joe on TikTok because of China's spyware. I'm like, how many White House aides probably have TikTok? They probably, why should they be on it at all? So what would Joe Biden do on TikTok? What would he do besides look like a babbling old fool? Like, again, no one on that app really goes to bat for him. There might be a couple people doing some social stuff, but they'll just say he's better than Trump. Like that's their baseline, that he's bad, but he's better than Trump, which isn't true. And people will even say, why pick the lesser of two evils? They're calling them both evil still. Now, I don't feel that Trump wasn't evil, but they're still calling them both evil. But this idea of Joe Biden being that having that empathy and being that grandpa that America needs right now, it doesn't really focus on the thing that is really important right now that Americans truly, 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 truly want. They want freaking solutions. They want solutions to their problems. That's what they want. And you know what? Sometimes people will go in my comments on my videos and they'll say things like, why are you Republican? What did they do for you? And I can name things. I can name very specific things. I can name monumental things like the freed slaves. We can start with that. Or we can say stuff like, hey, I got a tax cuts during Trump administration that helped a lot of people despite, media lies and whatever. Even the media eventually came out clean with that. A lot of people, benefited from that. I can name quite a few things, but I'm just like, why do these people need someone to do things for them so badly? The fact that politicians know that they can hand you stuff and you'll be willing to just like clap like a trained seal and vote the way they tell you to vote is how we get into a lot of trouble, actually. And you know, that's actually how the black vote started to depart from the Republicans is that you had certain promises in the New Deal that FDR and stuff made, and people started kind of moving around like during that time, even though in the long run a lot of those policies didn't even like end up helping. As a matter of fact, that's when redlining happened under FDR, and that's like the first go-to when people talk about systemic racism is redlining. So and minimum wage, by the way, ended up hurting black people, and eugenics pushed that. That's it. So we can go into that another day, which we've talked about before, but just want to throw that out there. So people just voting off of like what makes them feel good or what will, I don't know, give them some kind of short satisfaction isn't great. You know, I vote based on, I'm a Republican because that's where my ideals are. I'm undoubtedly a conservative. And am I going to be a Democrat conservative? No, of course not. I read the platforms. I look and like, I agree with this stuff. I'm a Republican. That's why I'm not a Republican because they're like, if you vote for me, we're going to have like the Warnock and Ossoff thing. Vote for us. You're going to get $2,000 checks. By the way, they didn't give you $2,000. They lied and come back with like, was it $1,400 they gave instead for some reason, and I don't understand why. So these people can lie to you, and maybe they're not lying to you, and they'll actually give you things. But that might be at the detriment of the country. We spent so much money, and now people's like, inflation, why is it so crazy? Our spending was crazy? Like, come on. We can blame politicians, and we should. We should, but there's a lot of people who went along with the spending because they knew how the media would treat them, and if they didn't go along with all the mass spending, and then the public would treat them terrible because they didn't go along with the mass spending, and now we're all reaping the rewards of our own issues and our own lack of accountability and responsibility. So just voting because someone is going to be your Grandpa Joe because you want somebody to pat your little bottom? No. And you know, that's the thing about the grandparents versus like the parents. The grandparents are the ones who get tired and just give you crap. And the parents are the ones who are actually doing the child rearing. So no, we don't need a Grandpa Joe who's going to, you know, let you creepily sit on his lap and lick some ice cream while it spills on you or something. You know, and sniff your hair. But that's not who Americans need. They need someone who's going to maybe tell it to them tough sometimes. And be like, but you know, we need to grow up and we need to set some things straight, get some things right. And this may hurt your feelings sometimes, but I'm trying to make sure that we become a responsible adult here. So no, we don't need Joe, but it really struck me that it was interesting that they were so obsessed with the image of Joe Biden and not really like, how can we get these solutions and stuff across, and how can we solve the problems? And I understand that to some regard, maybe that's not exactly what the article is about, but they're just obsessed with this whole empathy thing. And I know that is a huge Democrat talking point. We're the party of empathy. For those who don't know, I actually went to a Democrat Party picnic last year, and that was a talking point. And they thought that was like the big difference between Republicans and Democrats is that they have empathy, and we literally do not have empathy. So people need beyond empathy. They need you to solve the problem. Here's a little bit of CNN talking about the high disapproval rating of Biden.
Things sure stand out in this new poll. One, the economy, a top priority. And two, Americans disapprove of President Biden's handling of this more than ever before.
Yeah, and those two things together spell a tough political environment for Democrats, the president and his party. Take a look here. Most important issue, it's by far, Jake, 50% of people in this poll say the economy is the most important issue facing the country. Russia-Ukraine war at 14%, immigration at 10%. Everything else in single digits. We should note this poll was completed just before that bombshell news from the Supreme Court on abortion. Biden's handling of that number one issue only had a 34% approval rating on the economy, 66% disapprove. And that number there, Jake, that's been going down since our poll earlier this year. He was at 37% approval on the economy. Now he's down to 34%. And in terms of Biden's policies, look at this. A majority of Americans in this poll, 55%, say Biden's policies have actually worsened economic conditions. 26% no effect. Only 19% of Americans in this poll say Biden's policies have improved conditions.
Yeah, so a lot of people would really like people to care more about the racial stuff so they can keep race baiting and whatnot, but that's just not where Americans are. They want to know why all this stuff is so high. When are these prices going to go down? I was like dreading like the $5, and we approached it. I guess I should have just went ahead and got a fill up yesterday, but I didn't expect it because I got it for $3.89. I wasn't expecting like another like 20, 30, maybe it's even 30-cent jumps from in some places. When I saw the 509 at usually the place where it's cheap, I was shocked. I was shocked. I was surprised the Speedway on the corner still had it at $4.99, but it's crazy. Thank you everyone in the comments who watches live. I know some of you may not still be there, but someone said, what does a 18-year-old kid need 2 AR-15s for what purpose? They want them to just be in their house. They can do that. If they want to use them for sport, they can do that. What does it matter? For the same thing someone at 20 or 21 or 30 would need them for? Is your problem that they have 2 AR-15s? Maybe it's a couple, and they want to make sure that they can both protect themselves when there's an intruder. But again, we use our guns for sport. We can use them for hunting. We can use them for protection. A lot of people use them for their self-preservation, and that's great. But the reason why we have a Second Amendment is a deterrent from a tyrannical government. And you can say, well, we won't be able to stop the government. Well, I don't know. This looks like they had a hard time at Nam and in Afghanistan. I guess it depends who's the one at the top. But the point is that they'll have to try. The point is that they'll have to try. But that's what it's for. We have a God-given right, and the Constitution has that in there, not because they give us our rights, but because they recognize the rights and they didn't want it to be infringed, and it's a limitation on what the government is supposed to be able to do. It doesn't really matter why you think an 18-year-old should have guns, but the fact of the matter is, if you think that's an age where someone is legal enough to be an adult, to get married, to sign contracts, to be drafted into war and sent overseas to fight, then they should be able to exercise their Second Amendment. And if that is too young, because it is too immature or whatever, then they definitely don't need to be voting. And I've made jokes about raising the they're kind of serious jokes. Like I don't expect to push for it, but I do think our country would be better off if we did raise the voting age. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. See. Someone else had said they had never heard of the bombing with the water canisters in Afghanistan. Yeah, after we had our military, a couple of people who died at the airport. Biden had a speech. He was all fiery, like, we're gonna make them pay. And then like immediately they did like a drone strike, and I'm like, oh, they're striking back pretty fast. Turns out that those people that man wasn't a terrorist. He was an aid worker, and they did a drone strike. And at first they're like, if the strike was true, etc. And they claimed there was a secondary explosion. So because of the secondary explosion, they're like, it was confirmed he had bombs in the vehicle. But New York Times did an extensive investigation, and there actually was no secondary explosion, so that was a lie. And it wasn't bombs in his car, it was water canisters, because he's like an aid worker and he's bringing home extra water. And so him and some kids were killed, and nobody paid for it. There was no sort of repercussions for that. So we do not have a responsible government. So if someone needs to do a background check, maybe we need to do one on the Biden administration. Because I really do not believe that they should be the only ones with weapons of war. Anyway, thank you guys for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on the website, different videos that we have posted. Please check out different merchandise that I have on the shop, like the Trump 2024 Make Crack Whack Again. If you follow that crack pipe story, that's where that's from. The My Money, My Business shirt. The Constitution is a Glorious Liberty document t-shirt. You can get that especially for 4th of July as people try to tear that down. So you got Mr. Frederick Douglass, who always believed in the greatness of the Constitution. And I already mentioned this a few times, but you got the Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of some of his racist comments on the back. And hey, since you're here, I'm going to play it one more time about the donut thing.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. It's a fully, I'm not joking.
Yeah, it's National Donut Day. So the RNC posted that, or GOP War Room. I'm like, that's a good tweet. That's a good tweet. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Anything you guys can do to support. I know like gas is high and times are tough. But I really appreciate anyone who can spare was $10, $15, $20, or $50 more. I've had people give more. I'm like, oh, wow, thank you so much. To support what I do here, running the website, the stream, the gas for me to get to A to be able to do it. I really appreciate you guys as we continue to grow doing here at Black Teen News. And I'm glad when people come here and they can sharpen their arguments and they learn something new. That's why I do what I do. And I really want to encourage people to have conversations with each other, because I feel, and someone actually in the comments I think today wrote, go run for office. And I've been there, done that a little bit, but I'm not passionate about me running for office. But I really do feel like the big issue that we have is this media gap. And I want to be able to at least pierce through and do my part with that. And I've talked about it at length before, and I can go into more in another time. But one thing that always strikes me as odd and about the election, and people will say 81 million about Joe Biden. No, regardless whether you feel that it was legitimate or not, I always like to see that Trump lost legitimately lost a rigged election is how I like to put it. But they say 81 million. Very ironically, like they don't believe that many people out there would vote for Joe Biden. And it is hard to believe, but you do realize that there's that many people who are uninformed who would perhaps vote, right? So, I mean, there's a reason why so many people want to get rid of the Electoral College, because they believe that they can misinform the masses to be able to think and feel a certain way, especially feel a certain way. The Democrats like their voters to be emotionally charged rather than factually informed. And that's why they're like, Joe Biden is a president of empathy. We need to get this empathy out there. Empathy. And that's why he feels like he can get up and lie about certain things regarding guns, like lying about background checks and so on, because he wants you to just be able to feel, because the feelings and the narrative is more important than the truth. So my thing is to sort of try to break through that wall and that barrier. So if you want to support, like, there's not going to be a campaign anytime to support, but you can support Black Teen News. So you can go to blackteennews.com/donate to the website, blackteennews.com. It's black. I mean, it's right there on my little, name tag down there, but it's black like the color, tea like the drink, blackteennews.com/donate. All right, guys, thank you so much. And I will see you on Monday. And we're coming up on my birthday week. Next Friday, I will be 33. And then my siblings will start saying, you older than Jesus. But God bless you guys.